Hello, welcome everybody at this IMPAKT event at Buzzhouse. We're very happy to be here. My name is Arjon Dunnewind. I'll introduce the other people in a second. You might be wondering why I'm having a microphone where there's no amplification. That's because we're recording the event, and I also hope to take some of your questions during the event, and that's also, again, where the microphone will come into play. This is a IMPAKT event with special guests, disobedient, Maria Roszkowska, Nicolas Maigret here. They will present their work to you. We are a guest of Marc Tuters over here. At least that's our go-between that brought us here in the Buzzhouse. Maybe for those of you who don't know, IMPAKT is a center for media culture in Utrecht. The reason that we're here now with this Disinnovation event is that we're about to open a very exciting exhibition, actually, post-growth, na de Groei in Dutch, in our center in Utrecht. We're based in the center of Utrecht, so close to the Dom Tower, easy to find. It's going to be a very special exhibition where I think several installations are becoming one big work, and I'm very excited to see it. It's in the making. The exhibition will address what Disinnovation will present to you in the second chapter of today's event, which is post-growth, thinking about the current climate crisis, and looking at economic dogmas that we're all probably thinking of, can get rid of, or can't think outside of, and technological dogmas. So how do these dogmas influence the current situation in the climate crisis that we're in? That's going to be the second chapter of today's event. And they will start with maybe what is a bit more of their older work, not so old and still very exciting, online culture wars, looking at power structures on the internet, at political cultures and subcultures on the internet. For both of these chapters, we have some very nice printed material brought with us. You can take it with us. A poster with a collection of memes, as you can find them on the internet in political subcultures. In a spectrum, going from, I think, conservative to, well, the economic right. Well, here you can see it yourself. Probably you will explain it a lot. And there's the posters, the green and the black one, that are actually connected to the post-growth presentation. Marc, maybe you add some to my introduction.
I don't have much to add, just to say that this is the Buzzhouse space. It's a student-run space, autonomous, or at least semi-autonomous. And I would like to thank Izzy and Norian, who are always running this place. You can come here to use this space. You're encouraged to do so. It's available for student use, and this is kind of a bit of a launch event for this space. So thanks for coming out, and I'm very much looking forward to this evening's presentation.
These are the brochures of the exhibition. You can find them on the tables. We don't have the entire collective here tonight because the third member is missing, Baruch Gottlieb. He will be there for the opening next week, but right now there is Disinnovation with Maria and Nicolas. Please go ahead.
Thank you. So, hello everyone. Thanks for being here. My name is Maria Roszkowska. This is Nicolas Maigret, and together we started disinnovation.org collective. In our work, we intend to reveal and challenge the dominant ideology of technological innovation and stimulate and highlight alternative narratives. We identify ourselves as technocritics, so I will just show some of our project, of our work quickly. So we work in different fields. We do creation for festival and art spaces. Is the sound okay? Yeah. We also do artworks, like I should talk this one?
Yeah. Sure.
Yeah.
Can I switch it off when I'm not talking? Yeah, sure. Okay.
Okay, maybe, is it better? Yeah. So we are doing artworks, installations like here with Predictive Artbot, a website and an algorithm that transforms the latest media headlines into artistic concepts. And also we do research and publications like books, for example, the Pirate book we did in 2015, a blacklist and a cartography of online culture wars that I will present now. So our program for tonight is first I will quickly introduce issues around online manipulation and talk about two older projects focusing on this specific topic, and then Nicolas will introduce our last series of projects. So the background of the project was initially triggered by a political situation in Poland a few years ago when a very quick transformation, political, social, and economic, from communism to free market economy led to a backlash and social division. So with a huge political division of the society over politicization of every aspect of everyday life, resulting in things like cities declaring themselves as LGBT-free zones, anti-abortion trucks circulating in the city, and people commonly displaying like political symbols in their windows or balconies. So it was like very present in a public space. So that was the main trigger. But in the trilogy, The Web Politics, we tried to address these issues a bit larger. So the project is composed from 3 projects, like the main project is 3 projects: cartography on online influence and paranoid politicization of every element of everyday life. So this is online culture wars. There is a compilation of tools and tactics for online influence, the persuadables. And the last one, profiling the profilers. So it's surveillance capitalism, which slides into glitch capitalism. So I will present the map you just saw, online culture wars, which is a cartography of online influence in the form of political compass meme. So I will explain quickly what is political compass. It is a system, a multi-axis political model used to label or organize political thought on 2 dimensions. So the political compass format has been often criticized for the lack of very clear methodology, but nonetheless become a popular format on online forums and the memosphere, where it often integrates non-political characters and pop culture references. So everything may become political in this context. So one day we found this same political compass, which is a typical joke of the memosphere. It was posted on Reddit in category starter packs in 2018 by an unknown user. So it seems like a soft expression of what was actually happening in society in Poland and in many other countries a few years ago. So this was like a politicization of everyday life and polarization of the society. So for this project, we get inspired by this one, and then we started to collect this kind of memes. So we collected like hundreds of them from different online forums and combined them, overlaid them using mostly user-generated content and meme culture. So we did also many lectures, like from books like by Angela Nagel, Florian Kramer, Oxford Computational Propaganda Project. So I will just show you a quick short video of the working process.
In recent years, online cultures have been subjected to a growing polarization, politicization, and radicalization, influenced by numerous actors, and magnified by the very features of ubiquitous social networks. From Twitter to Facebook, Instagram, Reddit, Gab, or 4chan, one of the byproducts of online culture wars is the over-politicization of seemingly mundane topics, products, practices, and cultural elements. The occurrences of this very process have been compiled and documented in the form of a political compass. Here is the resulting map. The map, Online Culture Wars, is an overlay of hundreds of politicized memes, along with influential political figures and symbols. It is designed as a discussion starter, intended to visualize and contextualize the ongoing online culture wars and some of the main political references, actors, and influencers. This cartography offers a representation of online ideological and political frictions, integrated into the visual system of a political compass meme.
So actually the political compass model reflects more the political opinion of the person that creates it. Then actually this is what is made for, like to make the profile, your political profile, then a specific representation of the objective truth of the network. So this was kind of this is a kind of subjective prototype, as every person in the room would come with slightly different political representation. And our idea was to create a sort of pedagogical atlas as a tool, and like a world map facilitates thinking about geopolitics. So this could be like a discussion starter about online influence and a simple visualization of influential Western web players. And every time we show it, we try to update it because, of course, the influencers change. So with every exhibition, we add new elements, we remove some elements. Usually we show it like a big 3 meters by 4 meters wallpaper and a stack of posters to take away, like the one you have it and you can take with you. And also we usually show a contextualization video about online manipulation tools and strategies that I will explain just now a bit more. So it's called the persuadables. And in marketing slang, the persuadables means customers who only respond to the marketing action because they were targeted. So they are also the sure things, so the customers who would responded whether they were targeted or not, or do not disturbs or sleeping dogs, which are customers who are less likely to respond because they were targeted. So I will show again a short teaser that explains a bit what it is, and if I have some time, I will just zoom on a few tools, manipulation tools, to explain what kind of things are used.
The video, Online Culture Wars, focuses on the political instrumentalization of the tools, techniques, and infrastructures of the web, with a particular attention to the social media influence ecosystem and the manipulation of opinion online. Like with physical architectures, digital architectures manifest and encourage their own specific behaviors and political dynamics. Ubiquitous social networks gave rise to new types of practices, new forms of expression, and new means for collective organization, of protest and discord. In this context, the manipulation of public opinion over social media platforms has emerged as a critical threat to public life. A range of government agencies and political parties exploited digital platforms to spread junk news and disinformation, exercise censorship and control. The video, Online Culture Wars, exposes some practices broadly used for online propaganda, as well as creative responses that they triggered in the civil society.
So for now, the video is a compilation of 15 techniques of manipulation and influence, but almost every day there are new stories and strategies that appear in the media that could be added. Some of them are quite obvious, like online bots, for example. I think most of people know them. It depends on some depends on specific locations, like sock puppets. Some are coming from advertising, politics, or civil society. Some work in more sophisticated or tricky way. So, like for example, junk news, which are.
Junk news deliver sensationalized, personalized, and homogenized inconsequential trivia, often at the expense of serious investigative journalism. While not very nourishing, it is cheap to produce and is profitable for media proprietors. A recent study showed that 70% of people actually never read more than the headline of a science article before commenting and sharing. Most people simply see a headline they like and click share and make a comment. As an illustration of this phenomenon, this article of the Science Post has been shared 120,000 times. An internet jump is a form of online advertising that uses grids of images and captions that lurk below articles, often working to disgust, terrify, or titillate you into a click and drive traffic to other sites and web pages. The ordering of the boxes is carefully crafted to match images of skin, vaguely edible vegetables, and other elements that create a deeply limbic response, implying an almost autonomic desire to click on them.
So what I'm showing right now are the parts of the video. You can see it online on our websites. Like just there are different chapters. There are like 15 chapters. So there's like I can just show a few, and then I will let you. Yeah, so dark advertising is a technique which is largely used which was largely used during American presidential elections. And the Trump campaign was using targeted Facebook posts to discourage Black Americans from voting, as well as during 2017 UK general elections and during Brexit Remain campaign. So after uncovering this kind of ads, that this kind of ads are being used by Facebook, some changes were made by the company to prevent it happening again. For example, for every advertisement, right now there is a mandatory mention who is paying for it.
Dark advertising is a type of online advertising visible only to the advert's publisher and the intended target group. Major campaigns of disinformation around Brexit may have reached over 10 million people via Facebook in the UK. These targeted ads, sponsored by Vote Leave and others, began to appear on key voters' feeds. Disinformation campaigns are functionally similar to any advertising campaign. They essentially use platforms as they were designed to be used.
So maybe I will finish with this one. Astroturfing is a real technique, but at the other hand, it is the news. There's a strong counter-argument while there is a massive protest, and the opponents are trying to discredit the demonstrators. So this is like fake crowds, or there are companies which you can address to rent people for protests.
A message or organization to make it appear as though it originates from and is supported by grassroots participants. The company, Crowds on Demand, provides its clients with protests, rallies, flash mobs, and paparazzi events. They advertise themselves as a cost-effective way to lobby government to pass or defeat legislation, push for approval of projects, and influence government in a grassroots manner.
Okay. I think it was just a quick introduction to the project, so you can watch the whole movie. It's like 20 minutes, the whole film online, if you are interested, and you have the posters also you can take with you.
And we can just discuss.
Yeah, can we talk a little bit about the?
Sure.
Okay, cool. I wanted to ask you about the map, the poster, and your the role of research in your practice. You had mentioned when you were talking about it how these political compasses are these subjective things that present the point of view of the person who's making them. Mm-hmm. Is this one made from a single point of view? So it's the outcome of a collective effort? Could you tell us a bit about how that works?
Yeah, it was our idea was to create a discussion starter, so a project that is like really triggers interesting political frictions and discussions. And we were that was the first project we worked with Baruch on this, and this was really interesting because our political views are quite different at times. So that was a very interesting process to discuss the positioning of every element. So that really created like political discussions why we should put this. And yeah, it was very. And this is kind of the goal of the project, like just to this situation, like stimulation of the situation of discussion.
So would you say
maybe
that,
the layer that is missing is that it didn't came out from nowhere. So we really started with sort of a pseudo-scientific methodology where we collected lots of those online compass memes and started to just average them and compile them, which became this huge mess. And sometimes you will end up with things that are twice in totally opposite direction because, you know, some of those maps are created by people that are 14 years old and they, you know, they don't know exactly what I don't know, like Stalin stands for or whatever, or you know what the Holy Bible, if it stands for something which is extreme right, or if it's rather something from the left. I mean, so you end up with things that are totally contradictory. But by parts. So we had this kind of first layer of putting everything in average and in addition, like in a cumulative manner. Yeah. And then we started discussing with Baruch to sort of figure out how we sort out the conflicts, right? When things start appearing in 4 places or whatever. And we came out with this kind of refined and cleaned version that is sort of an average that has been at some point discussed and
so you think of it as
up.
Somewhat in contrast with the subjective style of political compass means this is more neutral, a bit more neutral version?
The ideal case scenario was really to have this kind of no intervention accumulation. You know, like you will have this kind of summary of a few hundreds of political compass that kind of reveal, you know, like the by default ambient views of of 4chan or of online culture in a way. Obviously, you cannot get that, but that was the kind of, you know, initial scenario that we would do this kind of infinite layers of online compass, and then at some point you have to arbitrate to average more or less things. So that's how it came out, and obviously, as Maria said, you have to embrace the fact that it's never going to be scientific. It's never going to be a proper methodology. So it's a little bit as it is.
So there are these posters that folks can take here, which is very nice. Is it now? How long ago was it that you made it? A couple of years ago now, yeah.
Mm-hmm. 4 years ago.
And when you look back at that piece,
5 maybe.
Has anybody changed in that they would be in a different spot? Like, I don't know, like AOC, for example, does she still something like that?
I mean, as I just said, like I would say this map is different from if we were filling a political compass by ourselves from scratch, because it started as an average of existing stuff. So it's not like a pure portrait of where we will put stuff ourselves from scratch. So it's this kind of semi. So in this sense, you could negotiate and start debating the position of every element in this, and from one moment in time to the next, things are changing as well, because the way people will identify, I don't know, someone like Elon Musk 6 years ago. Maybe has slightly changed over the years with the news and the better understanding of his political positions and his decisions with his companies and so on. And so over the years also it refines where those companies and those people and those commercial products as well, what they represent and what they've been also weaponized for, because some products are weaponized for reasons that are beyond their reach. So at some point you can end up with Pepsi that will suddenly be identified with a political view that was not part of the game.
So it's a sort of a slice in time.
Sure.
And does anybody have any? I wanted to ask you guys, has the internet subculture founded and responded? Do for example, Anons have an opinion about your poster?
I think it's been posted at some point, but I couldn't.
I guess we tried to inject it in Reddit and at the time, but there wasn't much. It didn't create it like a whole discussion, I guess. But yeah, there was some feedbacks, but
I also wanted to ask you about the female Stephen Hawking's voice in the videos. If there's any significance to that choice as an aesthetic choice.
I would say that at the time we started collecting, basically while working on the map, we were also, as Maria said, looking at how Poland was starting to be highly politicized and highly influenced by online media, because it was quite strongly visible, and that's where Maya comes from. So we started to compile a lot of facts and a lot of anecdotes and so on. And that's the shape we started to give it. So we did put it in a keynote, in slides, one after the other, with little notes, with little extract of articles and of inquiries and investigations and so on. And at some point, just as a way to navigate through that, we did put a by default voice, and it became the video slowly.
Yeah, it was. We wanted to make kind of parody of educational video, like a cheesy keynote or PowerPoint, which is like to learn how techniques. So it's like very educative. Like in school.
In its shapes.
Yeah.
There's a question.
Just a second.
Sorry. Thank you. Were you familiar with all the subcultures that you discovered while doing this accumulation? And if you weren't, which one was the most interesting one you found?
I guess we were not familiar with Gab or 8chan. I mean, we knew of its existence, but we were not navigating those channels before. What else?
We were actually we were really focused on tools, manipulation tools, more than the subcultures. We were trying to make a kind of analysis of methods. So it was really in a point of time. Now it all shifted. It's changing, and but yeah, it was more like a mean to understand the manipulation tools more than kind of trying to understand the communities or the subcultures.
Thank you.
Other questions?
Thank you. Do you have a system for deciding who goes on the map and who doesn't? Because I imagine there are more people and things you could put on there than there's room for. So you have to leave some out. And do you have a system for that or criteria?
Basically, we kept the elements that were recurrent. Yeah, it could be endless indeed, but we kept them when they were appearing more than once or twice, So
it's a survival of the fittest sort of style.
Yeah, kind of, yeah. But indeed, I mean, if you made it as an online map, you could have granularity, you could zoom in and have secondary elements. But for instance, if you think about brands, you will find brands using this kind of critical maps or online maps quite often. So yeah, when they were popping up a few times, we just started incorporating them in between political figures and so on. Yeah, that's as scientific as it goes.
Thanks.
Wondering about the manipulation tools you mentioned, how do you think we can move forward from the current online spaces into ones that are more resistant to those manipulation tools? Or do you think, have you seen that in your research, some sort of hope in, I don't know, different ways of thinking about the web?
Basically, parts of those manipulation techniques are techniques that are bottom-up. But most of the time it's sort of anecdotal in terms of reach. Because there is a sort of the order of magnitude of the ability to affect and to have an audience and to have a reach is without any comparison, or there are some very nice and inspiring and interesting bottom-up techniques, but if you think about the scale of the reach and of the impact it can have on society, it's more like symbolic, I would say. So I don't know if it gives hope. It gives hope in this room. It can give hope in this room, but I don't know if it gives hope from a purely technical and statistical point of view.
Maybe related to this bottom-up thing, maybe what I heard on the news that these Canadian trucker protests were influenced. We're imagining maybe Russian troll farms to be very influential, or Cambridge Analytica. But what I heard is that it was even Vietnamese campaigners influencing that and doing it for commercial goals. So just to lead in the end people to other websites where there was someone with a commercial interest having all these clicks. So navigating traffic to certain websites. What can you tell about political influencing on the internet and whether it's politically motivated, why maybe the Russian troll farms are, or whether there's commercial mechanisms behind it? I don't know if that's something you came across in the research.
Well, actually, it's kind of connected because Russian troll farms also use like the dark advertising, for example, is using typically platforms as they are designed to be used for advertisements. So these are basically. This is kind of a little crack they just use to. That's how they use them, and then there is hope because then we can see, like on Facebook now, all the advertisement needs to be like transparent who is paying for it. So it's like it's then for Russian troll farms, I guess it depends also on countries. I think I don't know. There are countries much more influenced than others. So like in Poland, there is lots of them, for example. And I guess
and when we were developing the research, we also spent some time in Finland, and they were also highly attentive to the supposed and demonstrated effect of troll farms on their political debates and also the emphasis that will be put on specific daily news or side events, that will suddenly take a lot of room because it's been amplified in some ways. And like 3-4 years ago when we were in Finland, it was it took a lot of the political attention. This kind of sub-layer of potential influence that was revealed, just basically the tip of the iceberg here and there. Sometimes a story will unfold a little bit of the mechanism behind it. And I think we are not answering to the initial question, but anyway.
More questions?
maybe I could ask about the title, the online culture war. Do you think that is a helpful metaphor for thinking about stuff going on the internet? Like, is it really a war? Is it like a world war, or is it a war at a different scale? And if it's a war, then are there battles, and are there certain battles that have been won and lost, and have the tides turned? You know, these are all metaphors from war.
Sure.
Are those, after having worked on that and used this metaphor, which is of course popular, or at least was popular at the time, with I think a subset of the people on the map. What's your opinion on that? Look from this point also now where we are some years later as well.
Well, I would say that at least at the time, it really felt like some cultural icons and cultural elements were clearly used as weapons. And I guess that's perhaps a lot of the explanation of why it started to be named this way, like either culture wars, which is an old debate already from 60s, 70s, and this online culture wars, which is like, second, third waves of these kind of practices. Basically, just the only fact of showing a book or showing or wearing a brand of shoes or something like that is already sort of a position and an argument and potentially a friction with your with the people you are debating with, right? And that's sort of what was quite visible at the time, and I guess that's in this context that the title made some sense. Obviously, it's often more complex than that in the sense that some of the soldiers of this online war were not even conscious of repeating those codes because when you are in a I would say echo chamber, it becomes sort of obvious that those codes are your code and are the codes of your community, and they are weaponized without knowing it or repeated without knowing it. So indeed, I mean, in some extent, it's different from the pure technical sense of.
I have maybe a last question, and then you guys perhaps could have the your current work to talk about, and I think that there's quite a bit to talk about there. Do you, as having been in the trenches of the online culture war, do you have some sort of like tactics or something like that you think are useful for people who want to fight back? We heard somebody use the term of resistance before. Mm-hmm. Is there anything that maybe in studying the enemy, if there's anything that you feel that you've learned that you can share with the audience this evening?
Sure. I mean, there are couples of very detailed PDF tutorials coming rather from the right wing of the culture wars that have a level of details and strategic awareness, which is incredible and which is, I think, quite interesting not only to apply but just to be aware of and to understand and to sort of I would say it's just a reality check to understand what's the level of the understanding of the methods, the techniques, the understanding of the persuasion and the psychology of your opponent or your target audience. And I'm not sure I've seen this level of understanding on the other dimensions of the spectrum, right? So yeah, the guides that emerge from the hardcore 4chan subgroups at this time were quite amazing, just to understand this level of strategic I don't know, like ability in organization. And I would recommend looking at those. I don't have names here, but we can just look in our archive after and share a few.
Thank you.
Yeah, maybe we go on to the second part, post-growth. Previewing more and talking more about your current works, a series of works.
Faut que je starte? Okay. Yeah, so it would be quite of a stretch because we're jumping from a topic to the next. Maybe we will figure out if there are some links of use or not. But right now it's a bit of a jump. So as Maria explained, initially, when we started working as Disnovation 10 years ago, we identified one main thing that made us start Disnovation as a collective, which was the fact that being active in the new media art field made us evolve and take part and in some way validate a machine that was built to support the innovation status quo and the economic status quo in a way. So let's say we were part of those new media show and those fairs and blinking LEDs, outdoor venues, festivals, and whatever. That at the end of the day, you don't really care about what's the topic and the underground story that the artists want to bring, because at the end, what it's saying publicly is those are the new tools, those are the new means, those are the new vocabulary, and we tend to underestimate what's the strength and the importance of what artworks are saying beyond their official discourse. So if you have an exhibition with 20 iPad or with 10 VR headsets or with a facade of blinking LEDs, it says blinking LEDs and VR and AI before it says any sub-story you think you are saying. And the reason why we started Disnovation is really to sort of address that and talk about that and create sort of critical discussion around those sort of questions, right? So that was about 10, 12 years ago. And just after the project she presented, we started to sort of redefine what we wanted to address and go maybe a bit deeper. One layer lower in a way to address more like the economic status quo and to look at how basically our economic system is sort of related to the crisis we are going through, and that became our research question. So basically, in these projects I will present, we are basically looking at the friction space between economic growth and environmental crisis. And we started just this research as a sort of open question and open sort of prompt to meet with researchers, with activists, with writers, and try to collect elements to complete our understanding of this issue and perhaps to validate those hypotheses and develop a better understanding of that question. So basically, those are some of the notions that emerged from our series of interviews and so on. I will just share a few key, let's say, key concepts and key notions that are useful to take a hand on and to grasp the topic we will talk about for the next 30 minutes. So one of the main notions we like to share when we start talking about this research is this idea that we always think that we are entering a transition, and that the transition perhaps already started, or that perhaps will start soon, and we tend to give a lot of hope and a lot of trust in what this transition can bring. So that's interesting to look at the numbers and to look at the status of the things. And the idea is that historically there have never been deliberate transition. What we've seen is rather additions. So every time that the media put emphasis on transition, it tells you more about the fact that a new energy source is gaining attention or is coming into play, but it doesn't tell you anything about the previous energy sources, and most of the time they are used even more than they've ever been. So that's what this simple diagram tells us. And maybe what we can unfold from there is that it can give us some basis for reflection of what a transition can be, can mean, and how we can address differently our need or hope for transition, in the sense that maybe what we can understand from a graphic like that is that transition is not so much a question of technology or techniques or types of energy, but that it addresses a deeper issue, which is our value system and the way we work and organize ourselves. So that's more of a social structure that has to be addressed and rethink, rather than a technical issue of what type of energy we are using and with what we think we will replace it. If I may rephrase it or otherwise, if you think about the society as an organism, as a body, the amount of energy that this society needs to sustain, to maintain itself, can be seen as a metabolism in a way. And the question is not how you will shift 10% of this metabolism from one energy source to the other, but more, I guess, how you may rethink how this metabolism works in itself and how the society decide to fulfill its needs and its desires and so on. So that's maybe what we will go into after. The other thing that can help us to understand this idea, which is a very, like a little bit of a technocratic idea, is that, okay, the society can be seen as a machine or as an organism, but there are actually ways to see it by numbers. Basically, if you look at the connection between economic growth and pure energy input in the system, there are huge correlation between the two. And actually the way we can understand that is simply if you think about how you transform the planet around you. So if you think about each of you, the way that you interact and transform the planet around you, there is a big chance that it's not with the use of your body, So today, you don't shape the world around you with your body directly. You transform and affect and change the world around you through the interface of proxies and prostheses and technological or mechanical tools that are directly connected to you or far remote from you. And all those tools, this aggregate of tools or this meta machine that you affect with your decision and with your lifestyle and your whatever, and is fed by energy, and most of this energy is fossil fuel. So when you look at how much fossil fuel is input in the world economic machine, if you want, there is a strong relation with the economic growth that it will produce. Because once more, it's not the use of your physical labor that change the world anymore today as a statistic. And the third notion that we often share when we start this talk is more like qualitative than quantitative. It's this idea that even if the income seems to have raised in the last century, the level of happiness, or perceived happiness, don't seem to change that much. So that's a study over 50 years in North America. That sort of support this idea. So basically, with this kind of initial intuitions and clues, we started simply to go to different universities and meet with researchers, with activists, with writers, and collect notions as we were discussing with them, or as we were going through their papers and their conferences. And it started to take the shape of short videos. Each video sort of capture one notion that we think help to reframe a little bit the debate and to get a better grasp on the issues we are talking about when we are saying there is an energy issue in our society, or there is a need to rethink our energy systems, or our impact on the environment, or our CO2 footprint. So what does it really mean, and where are the places where it actually connects with our political understanding, with our political ability to act and to change. It's not so simple at first, so we started to collect bits that can help us to grasp that. We met with different departments, so not only with purely energy-related departments. So I will show you just a couple of examples. One is quite interesting. It's about how we can rethink the field of computing. I will just show this one.
Over the last number of years, and several of my colleagues and I have been working on a couple of different topics that interrelate. One is collapse informatics, and another is computing within limits. Both of them focus on the idea that industrial civilization, as we currently know it, is potentially creating the conditions for its own failure, or making the viability of its own ecosystems and its own ways of existing, calling them into question. And so both collapse informatics and computing within limits are exploring aspects of that problem, of sort of ways that we can use novel forms of computing and ways that these set of ideas affect the computing industry and the research community, to be able to bring about new kinds of computing systems that might allow us as a civilization to more effectively engage with these sets of issues. So, for example, collapse informatics was focusing on building systems in the abundant present for use in a future of scarcity. And computing within limits has been looking at the notion that industrial civilization is typically very much growth focused, and the computing industry situated within industrial civilization also tends to be growth focused. However, there might be new kinds of computing that could arise that could support a degrowth or an anti-growth type of direction for civilization, with the broad sense being that that will either be something that we go into voluntarily by transforming civilization into something that is not so growth focused, or something that will be thrust on us involuntarily as civilization potentially begins to collapse around us over the next couple of decades.
Yeah, so that one sample coming more from the field of computing and informatics. And on the other side of the academic spectrum, I can share an interview with Rose O'Leary, which is doing academic research on indigenous knowledges. So she's a descendant from an indigenous community, and she sort of started connecting wisdom and knowledge that she's been recipient of with the crisis we are going through, and to sort of find how those knowledge, those notions, those wisdoms could resonate and be activated or make sense in our current context.
The seventh generation principle is often attributed to many different North American indigenous peoples. However, I think you will find some version of it if you ask, or if you communicate with different indigenous nations. on Turtle Island. You can find the instantiation of the seventh generation principle amongst many, if not most or all, peoples on Turtle Island. So the seventh generation principle is just that anytime that someone makes a decision, they should think about its impact 7 generations into the future and make that decision mindfully and with care and responsibility for the health and welfare of the 7 generations into the future. The 7th generation principle also can be applied more broadly and often is. For instance, as a Washaji or Osage person, as a child, I was taught that whenever you are harvesting plants or animals, but particularly plants, you should always leave 7 plants for every one that you pick. And that's to make sure that the plants also have regeneration capacities for their 7 generations into the future. So in that way, we're not just thinking about the human 7 generations into the future, we're also thinking about all of life on this earth and its 7 generations into the future, in recognition that we need that balance in order for all of us to survive.
So basically that's been our methodology in the first part of the project, basically meeting with people and trying to isolate stronger notions that could be used or informative, at least, in the next steps of the project. So there are many others on the site, postgrowth.art, where we are slowly collecting those things. And basically, at this stage of the research, we started another sort of approach where we ask ourselves how to circulate those things, how to activate those notions, how to circulate them, and also, how to give room for friction, even for putting those notions that are not always aligned in creative friction and so on. So we started different, more artistic steps. So one is just simply to create this online repository for all the notions and the interviews. We started also to realize that a lot of those academic notions, they were actually not circulating outside of the academia. So we specifically realized that when we started going from one city to the other, from one university to the other, sometimes even in the same specialization, people were not really aware of the topics and the interesting concepts and notions that were developed in their peers' academic fields. So we started realizing that those notions were not circulating as we believed they should, and that one of the things they didn't have were visual proxy. Like they were mostly written research. So we started just a first effort of putting visuals or attaching visuals to those notions, and making also the effort of rephrasing them or isolating strong key points and so on. So that's this kind of series of cards and posters that are available here that resulted from that. And then we started also to figure out how we could activate those notions and activate also the debate around those notions. So we developed facilitation methods and experiments around that, around gameplay and mediation and so on. And that's how we started being interested by game mechanics, and we developed prototypes of simply how to create a good excuse to address those notions and to address those topics in groups. And also to, just to discuss also from different standpoints and different assumptions. So we really started to see game mechanics just as a proper excuse to try out situations like that. And yeah. And so from there, we then we isolated some of the notions that we thought were more interesting or stronger for us than others, and we started developing artworks around that. So it can be, like sculptural artworks that sort of grasp those core ideas, or that manifest the issues and the paradoxes behind those notions. So we just go through a few of those. So for instance, I will share one notion and then the project we unfolded from that notion.
For the vast majority of human history, humans lived on current sunlight. Sun fell on the fields grew plants, the plants made cellulose, plant matter. Animals ate the cellulose, we ate the plants, we ate the animals, we were living off current sunlight. It was our food supply, our clothing. We heated with wood, it was our heat supply, our light supply, it was all current sunlight. The sunlight that fell on Earth in a year was the maximum amount we could use. And from the earliest evidence of human civilization, 150,000 more or less years ago, up until a few thousand years ago pretty much, that's how we lived. And our population never surpassed 1 billion people. And then we began discovering that there were pockets of ancient sunlight, and finding coal here and a little bit of oil there, and slowly that and the agricultural revolution, our population crept up until we hit the first 1 billion people. Our second billion took only 130 years. When Kennedy was inaugurated, there were half as many people as today. The reason that we've been able to have this exponential growth of population is because we're creating food and clothing and everything else, transportation, we're doing it all with this ancient sunlight that was stored in the earth 300 and 400 million years ago.
By the way, that's the voice of Baruch Gottlieb, our collaborator, which is not here today, but he made the voiceover for parts of the film. Yeah, so basically one of the, even a few of the notions were about the importance of, obviously, fossil fuel and how hard it is to even think about the energetic density of fossil fuel and the singularity of this energetic resource. And indeed, it's quite abstract, like what it represents and how historically unique it is, and how it is sort of essential in the type of political and social status we are enjoying today. So we started to think about objects that can support better discussion and better also tangible experience of those questions. So already in the 40s, Buckminster Fuller came with this idea of the energy slave as a unit to think about how fossil fuel became the most influential actor of our lifestyle or of our level standing in society. So basically, already in the 40s, he realized that a civilian in North America would have about 100 times his physical power equivalent in fossil fuel. So it means that the lifestyle of a North American in the 40s was more affected by the use of fossil fuel, 40 times more affected by the use of fossil fuel than by the use of its own physical labor power. And today, if we were doing the same calculation in Europe, it will be between 400 and 500 times. So it means your lifestyle every day is affected 500 times more by fossil fuel than by the ability of your body. So it's like if you had 500 human equivalent producing your clothing, moving you around in town, heating your house, and so on and so on. And all of that is mostly fossil fuel. And it means that, as I said before, the ability to transform the world around you is affected by that much, much more than by your own physical activity in the world, and even more when you are in an intellectual lifestyle. Because in this type of cases, which is most of the cases around us and you, we don't really gain our living or produce our means of subsistence, of the things that makes us sustain as living bodies, you know, the food we eat, the places we live in, and so on. None of that is the result of our ability to act and move around and move things and shape the world. So those sculptural units are the equivalent of human labor time in their fossil fuel energy equivalent. So that's the exact size of fossil fuel that is the equivalent to a human labor duration. So you have like 1 hour, which is this tiny one here, 1 week, 1 month, 1 hour, 1 day, 1 week, 1 month, 1 year. So 1 year will be about between 20 and 30 liters of oil. So you can think that, you know, half of your car tank, if you have a car, is more or less the equivalent of a year of human labor. So those are kind of the scale, and those objects are sort of the physical embodiment of those order of magnitudes that are beyond understanding in a way, because the difference in scale is huge. And if you think about it, it tells you things about the type of society we live in the sense that if 30 liters of oil can be afforded for, I mean, you can buy it for 30 euros or 35 euros or whatever, if it's equivalent to a year of human labor, it means that on one side you have 35 euros of fossil fuel, on the other side you have 30K of hiring someone to perform a job, right? So it tells you something about the type of mechanics and the types of dependency that our society is based on today. So there is a video specific about, I mean, that project, but maybe we just skip it. You can look at it later, and I will just focus on one other of those projects that isolated one critical notion. This one is about the very problematic and critical notion, of ecosystem services, which is basically this idea that, okay, the biosphere around us is basically doing the work that we benefit from. So if you think about the Earth system, the only energetic input that comes from outside of this closed system is the sun. And then the sun power is harvested by plants, and then it circulates through the complexity of the biosphere. It's also transformed through wind. You know, it becomes wind and waves and so on. And all this is circulation of energy on Earth. So if you think about it, the reason why you have fossil fuel underground, the reason why you have plant matter is in some ways the work of the biosphere. And so that's a very interesting notion, but at the same time, this idea that ecosystems are providing services is also something that is used now in court to sort of, identify the degree of damage that needs to be paid by a company to a city or whatever because they polluted a river and so on. So that's something that can be very tricky and very counter-performative in some ways. But I mean, I will show you this video, and then the type of project and research we've been unfolding from there.
Ecosystem services, the idea that we need to move the ecology into the economy. We don't know if a given species of corn that might have been grown somewhere in Peru is going to be useful 100 years from now, 500 years from now, somewhere else. There is absolutely no way of telling which species are going to be valuable and which are non-valuable over time. That kind of false consciousness prevents us from seeing the world itself as interconnected, interknit in one way or another. Ecosystem services have this strange equation, and it's largely based on what this ecosystem is doing for me now. But if we get away from this frozen present, infinity starts appearing all over the place. If we take a sufficiently large expanse of time, and we pay sufficient attention to the imbrication, the way in which species interact with each other all of the time, the way in which species terraform the Earth, you're just going to run into infinities all of the time.
Okay, so basically when we started looking at this project, our main concern was the fact that on a daily basis, when you want to address how you are perhaps connected with the biosphere, the natural world, the ecosystems, the living thing around you, still we end up doing that through the words and the rhetorics and the analogies of economic system and economic wordings and economic framings. And the thing is that the current economic orthodoxy or economic status quo is built on the idea that like the ecosystem and nature has no intrinsic value translated into the economic monetary system. So, for instance, if you pay, if you pay this bottle of water €1 and this pack of chewing gum €1 and whatever service €1, it has nothing in common, and in no ways it translates the values provided by the earth or by the ecosystems or by the biosphere or whatever. It just translates a little bit of transport, a little bit of human labor, a little bit of machine expenses and stuff like that. So basically, there is hardly no way in the regular orthodox economic verbiage and ways of thinking to translate and to describe your relation to the living and to the ecosystem and so on. It's sort of obscured by design in what we call neoclassical economics. And we wanted to make a very simple experiment, a little bit of an absurdist experiment, that sort of grasp this idea and show the immense order of magnitude of what is hidden behind these regular ways of understanding value. So, maybe I show you the video if it's part of the slides. Yes, no.
This art project seeks to present the orders of magnitude of ecosystemic activity embedded in all planetary life processes, exploring the limits of quantification and the concept of ecosystem services. It is common to describe our relationships with society, the world, and the biosphere with metaphors from economics, which has specific understandings of value. With regard to the biosphere, today's prevailing economics conventions are unable to recognize intrinsic value in the ecosystems on which all life depends. In cultures overdetermined by concepts from economics, we are left without adequate discursive instruments to socially or politically address the importance of the work of the biosphere. The life support system experiment consists of 1 square meter of wheat cultivated artificially in a closed environment. All inputs, such as water, light, heat, and nutrients, are measured, monitored, and displayed for the public. This 1 square meter unit is capable of furnishing 1 day's worth of necessary caloric nutrition for 1 human adult every 4 months. To feed a single human adult would require approximately 100 such units running continuously. This procedure makes palpable the orders of magnitude of material and energy flows that are required to reproduce human nutritional requirements in closed or artificial environments, in contrast to outdoor agriculture on arable land. By attempting to grow a staple food such as wheat, which has historically provided the greatest proportion of necessary caloric intake for humans in Europe, this indoor farm experiment is a counterexample which points to the vastness of the ecosystem contributions involved in conventional agriculture. The empirical true cost estimates obtained through this indoor experiment are about €200 per kilogram of wheat, an extravagant cost compared to the 15 cents per kilogram current market price. This experimental farm foregrounds the incalculable ecosystem services demands of conventional agriculture, which we expect to access for free. On the other hand, closed environments must artificially reproduce these services at high social, energy, and ecosystem costs, which are mostly not accounted for. From a much broader perspective, this art experiment provides a speculative reference for a reckoning of the undervalued and overexploited work of the biosphere. Ecosystem processes provide the primary value at the core of each of our daily economic interactions within society.
Okay, so I can recap a few layers. So the first layer is obviously you understand that money is just a proxy, just a mean, and that money has no intrinsic value in itself. So the fact that you can eat every day, that you can have fabric on your back and so on, is not because of money, but because of flow of matter and energy around you in society and across the globe and so on. So what we wanted to address and grasp through this experiment is not a precise amount. We don't try to be scientifically precise and super fine-tuned on the number, but we just create the situation for an experiment to speak for itself. So basically, we bring a simple square meter of vegetal indoor. And by just doing this action, then you need to sustain it by all means. So you need to provide water, light, nutrient, earth, the soil, everything. So just by doing this act, you show how much is needed, but also you can just calculate how much is needed just to replace things that are usually hidden or unaccounted for. So it doesn't mean that the number you end up with is precise or that can be used in a court or in a trade, but it gives you an idea of the order of magnitude that we are talking about and the distance between the regular understanding and what would be maybe closer to a distant understanding of those value flows or energetic flows. So that's kind of what this experiment makes and stands for. And I lost my track, but I guess perhaps that's a good enough starting point, and I will fall back on my feet in a minute. So the experiment took different shapes, but basically it's this kind of indoor equipment normally used for growing weed in Holland. And more there are some startups popping up all over the place that are also using this kind of techniques to grow cucumbers or tomatoes or whatever. So what it means is that, I mean, it's also interesting on another layer because it means that today, because the energy is so cheap and because most of the energy is fossil fuel, we have this kind of weird understanding of the balance between the energy required to do something and the energy captured in the thing you are producing. So, for instance, if you are growing tomatoes in a container with artificial light and everything artificial and so on, maybe it's economically viable in today's understanding and in today's status quo. But if you think about the quantity of energy and material flow, so if you start accounting differently, it's a total aberration. I mean, it's almost absurd to think about how much end product is created with how much energetic and material waste in a way and flows. So that's really a matter of how you frame the question and how you start accounting, not to give a precise number, but to understand the scales of the things you're talking about. Yeah, maybe I will kind of stop here. There is a live stream of this experiment every time we do it, so where this sort of absurd accounting is performed in live and adjusts itself slowly based on the actual cost until the harvest of this square meter. And then we weight the quantity of wheat that we can produce, and we realign the results and so on. But yeah, that's kind of an ongoing pseudo-scientific experiment that will be presented at IMPAKT as well. And maybe it's enough for this introduction, and we can discuss in a more like informal way, if you want.
Super, thanks. Marc, maybe you have already questions. Anyone in the audience, please raise your hand if you have a question. Yeah?
Hi. Yeah, I want to kind of actually make a connection with the previous project. It's like in the process of kind of bringing out this academic concept into something that is more tangible and more consumable for the to the public. How do you actually make sure that the final product doesn't kind of end up in that political compass? Because these are concepts that should be internalized by the entire society, right? This implies the future of society and humanity. So how can you produce something that doesn't just feed one or the other echo chamber, let's say, and that is a little bit more agnostic from all that?
I'm not sure if I get exactly the place where you want to bring the discussion.
Like, is there, because these are art pieces at the end, right?
Sorry?
These are art pieces at the end.
Yes?
Yeah, mm-hmm. So how can we, is there a medium? Is there a way to have a medium? Is there a way to have a medium that that, let's say, expresses a concept in a way that cannot be politicized, let's say?
Mm-hmm.
Like the gamification thing that you presented at the end, I think that's kind of an example of how you can make something via gamification a little bit less political and more, but that's just an example. I don't know if it makes any sense.
Mm-hmm. I mean, I will try to answer with how it resonates and how I understand it right now. Obviously, there are many challenges when you start addressing those questions, and especially if you want to give more space and more political and social discussion around the topic and around ways to approach a topic. And that's where it becomes tricky, because obviously the art space is a very tiny niche within society. And if you are just evolving in art spaces, it's kind of a comfortable space to try out and to resonate ideas. That doesn't mean in any way that it will resonate further. So I mean, maybe that's one way to answer your question, and that's maybe where we started developing those little things around. I mean, first of all, we never developed projects with art spaces in mind at first. I mean, all the projects, even the stuff we were doing before, we always made stuff that have their own life, in the life of their own. So, you know, when we did the Pirate book, it ended up in art spaces, but it had its own life as a free book that circulated in forums and in amateur spheres, and has been printed in different places around the globe and so on, and it has its own life without art spaces even involved. Or when we do a map like this, or short videos and so on, they have their own type of lives even before there is an exhibition or after there is an exhibition. And we try to develop our project in this way, in the sense that we don't need the sort of we don't need the preciousness of the art piece as our economic. It's not our main economic mean, or we don't shape our project and our research so that artistic productions are made to be unique and sold to collector, and that they need to be restricted and kept, in a little space that is the fancy bourgeois art, little corners and whatever. So we never did like that, and deliberately we also take the other step, in the sense that it's more a type of work affected by the era of the internet, where things are made to circulate, made to be appropriated, replicated. Maybe somebody is reusing it to make it better, or to criticize it, or whatever. It circulates, it's free, and it has its own life of itself. So most of the things we do, we try to think about them like that, and even the things are presented potentially, and some of them actually, they have their own life, and they are used or discussed, or so a journalist will use it to illustrate an article, or to teach a class or whatever, and they have been thought this way, and when it works well, they have a little bit of this life of their own. And the art spaces is just where the comfortable space to discuss, to debate, to feed ourselves, and to have more in-depth discussions exist. But it's not where those works are meant to circulate, or where they only end up.
I hope that answered your question. I have a question that is maybe a bit related. I mean, often, a lot of the works, you didn't use the word now in your presentation, but you call them provocations. I would be very interested to hear a bit about how you use this provocation as a strategy in your work. Also maybe connected to this question, how alarmist you want to be in your work. Because, I mean, some of the models you show are, you could get very depressed from it. It could numb people. It could make people switch off. How do you still want to activate people and get them engaged and avoid the risk of numbing and becoming defeatistic? So maybe you can talk a bit about that area and how you navigate that.
About the provocation, it's more like I guess. Okay, let's say if it's just to say out loud things that we all already agree with and kind of sense. Okay, let's say in this room, there are things that are easy to say and that will be easily embraced, even if you haven't named them this way until now. It will be easy to bring them about. But then, if the point is not only this, but to try to play around with, like thought experiment or other ways to embrace an issue, and to deliberately take another path to embrace an issue, to show it from another angle and to give it an interesting critical dimension. And then we try to think about it more as a provocation, like a deliberate effort to be in a little bit of dangerous position, or a position which is at least less easy to take, and where you will never be totally right. So when we do the farm experiment and we show numbers of what will be the ecosystem services equivalent or so on, you are never right. You will be always wrong with a number like that. It will never be a right number. And even the protocol, like no scientific will even take the risk of doing a protocol like that, because it's, you can never get it right, because you can always push further and question what is not accounted for and what has been forgotten and so on. So that's a specific position as artists that you can take by doing those kind of shortcuts and deciding, okay, we will do it. We know that it's not perfect. And we can even spot and name the things that are not perfect, and we will embrace it and start from there. And it's even part of the discourse, and assume that way. So that's how I guess we frame this idea of provocations.
Questions from the audience or from Marc? Yeah, I'll give you the microphone.
I had a question also connected more to the aspect of like new media art and the art world. How much do you think the art world is growth focused, and how have you encountered that aspect? And sort of, I think this in a way addresses that aspect, also engaging more critically with the growth focus.
Okay, so one way to answer that is, if you look at media art as a caricature of the art sphere at large, it's pretty obvious in the sense that what is validated and what is uploads and expected and so on is clearly that is basically to come with new things, to come with ways of theatralizing the new, and you can make it from a critical standpoint, you can make it from a purely demonstrative standpoint, but all the machine of media art is built around that. So this year you will easily get grants if you are doing something about machine learning, but it can be super literal, it can be critical. On both cases you will get your grant and you will be part of this little machine. And in 2 years it will be another topic and another technique and another way to approach the hype of technological path. But all the system is built around that. And in some ways, soft critique is has its own little, paper to it, and it's okay. It's part also of this machine. So, from that standpoint, I think it's fully growth focused, and even it's the most beautiful expression of the growth machine, sort of embodied and accepted and digested in the way we act and the way we accept things and we validate things just by being part of them in this field of media, techno, science, art, and so on. So then, I mean, you can have another sort of storytelling around what you do and so on. But I feel like in itself, in its DNA, this field is totally an echo chamber of the growth mindset.
I'd like to ask a question. The concept of limiting growth was a topic in the 70s too, right?
Sure.
Yeah, and it was a quite it wasn't a topic amongst artists at that point. It was a topic amongst sort of like technocrats in like powerful business people and people associated with the sort of MIT and so on. The Limits to Growth, the Club of Rome, those kinds of references. And it was, at the time, it was that initiative was also criticized quite a bit by some people on the left because it was seen as, amongst other things, not taking into account the some of the other political issues that were, if you were to sort of look at it at a much broader level. And in maybe the most kind of clear example of that was the idea that, and you still hear this today all the time, that it's fine for you in the West, where you already have lots of stuff, to limit your growth. Other parts of the world need to do this kind of reckless growth to get off the ground in the first place. So it's kind of like a quasi-colonial mindset. I think that was part of the critique at the time. So I'm wondering how if those kinds of lessons of history in any way like relate to, if it's at all the same thing that you're talking about, or if it's really just completely unrelated. That would be like a first thing that I wanted to bring up, if that's of interest to you.
Sure. I mean, it's been most of the interesting sort of frictions amongst the degrowth, post-growth communities, and now it's sort of an obvious first layer of debate is this idea of what part of the globe are concerned with this limitation of different things, or at least this understanding that there are some balance and limits and effects of lifestyle in one part of the globe in other parts. And the fact that indeed some parts of the globe should not or cannot be limited if these kind of political ideas had to be enforced or had to be tried out and had to be sort of organized. It's kind of more and more clear in the degrowth debates that this should be adapted to different areas and to different economic status, and also to different accumulation of historical wealth. So I guess that's those level of understandings and debates were less common and less refined and identified in the 60s, 70s than they are now, as now they are put on the table like super early on, because they are like by default sort of layers of refinements you need to bring about discussions like that. I mean, then there is you can turn around also the whole discourse by saying we don't know where we're going. Life has always been about terraforming the earth and changing everything on earth. And on the long time frame, I mean, those things happen, and they already happen at different speed and so on. but I mean, if you think beyond the survival of humanity or whatever, I mean, we can just leave it go and something will come out, Anyway, something will come out. And that's how, life developed on Earth forever. And that's beyond political in a way. So you can also return all these degrowth arguments by saying, okay, some life forms did take over many times in the history of the Earth and made that we have oxygen to breathe today and that our era can exist. So if you take a totally different perspective, you can make the degrowth debate totally anecdotal and go beyond it as well.
Sure. I mean, you can say that it's not the Earth that's in jeopardy; it's people that are in jeopardy. The Earth is going to be fine, and so on. What I really liked about this last piece, and maybe if I can say, is how it kind of exposes the fantasy that you get from some people, maybe some people who are pessimistic. Like, actually, I would say Elon Musk is actually fundamentally pessimistic person. He thinks that the Earth is heading for disaster and that we need to leave. It's basically his story. Mm-hmm. I don't believe him, by the way. I think he just wants to mine the asteroids, actually. But, and then if you were going to leave, you would need to have these kinds of apparatuses in order to survive. Yeah. And it doesn't seem very feasible, according to the way that you guys have presented it here. I find that quite sort of impactful. And that was also a thing from the 70s, that everybody was going to live in space stations. Yeah. So, that comes back again.
Totally. And I think it's totally part of, we could say that part of this type of research could be considered as energy literacy. So, like helping people discuss and get maybe a more complex and nuanced understanding of, we are always related to dependencies in terms of energy. Because anyway, our condition of human is the condition of animals, and we don't create energy from ourselves. We are harvesting energy from other life forms to just survive, right? So there are some energy sort of demands and challenge at the core of our condition. And understanding a little bit better, or at least having a grasp and a sort of rough idea of what we're talking about, I think help us to consider what's possible and what are the sort of political assemblage that can be built to embrace those issues and those challenges. So this kind of project is just a mean to support that kind of discussion. And indeed, it's very close to a space experiment in the sense that the most radical illustration of what we're trying to do will be to do it in space, in the sense that you will not have gravity either, you will have even lower temperature. So a lot of things will have to be reproduced in a more extreme and radical way. So you will end up with maybe even more true results. And what I like about that is the fact that when we talk about climate damage, about environmental degradation and so on, we never really know. We talk in like emotional way, in an abstract way, but it's hard to know what is damage, how much, how large, or how huge, how important, how unrepairable are those damages. And by doing an experiment like that, it kind of give a clue, give a sense of what it usually provides. What are the order of magnitude which is usually provided by a healthy or balanced, temporarily balanced climate system or environmental system. And then maybe it give a clue of what it will mean to go further in this damaging situation.
Maybe we should work towards an end of the event. We have a little encore. I'll tell you about it later. But thanks all of you for being here. I invite you all to come to the opening of the exhibition Post-Growth, na de Groei, upcoming Friday at 5 o'clock, IMPAKT, Lange Nieuwstraat 4 in Utrecht. You can see that square meter of wheat growing. It will be very little plants, and I think at the end of the exhibition we hope to harvest it and maybe even eat from it. The encore I was referring to.
Bag of wheat, probably more.
The encore I was referring to is the Post-Growth Toolkit, the game. That's a game that you've designed. You can explain it to whoever is interested. Hang around and we'll explain the game to you. But if you leave before, feel free to take one of the posters, take our brochure. For now, I would like to thank Maria Roszkowska, Nicolas Maigret, and for being here. Disinnovation.org. Thanks a lot, and maybe give them a warm applause.